Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Go to strengthguild.com, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to the Iron Radio collections, and we've got new shirts and new banners for you to support the show. Everything from just a regular banner, regular shirt, to ones with sayings on them, like Lonnie's Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree shirt. And some news for you, we're going to have some contests for people who own these shirts and things. So if you support the show, we'll let you more on that later. So if you get in on these early, you can be one of the first people to win some prizes. So thank you very much. Go check out the site, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to Iron Radio Collections and support the show.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I'm a nutritionist, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I run Strength Guild. I'm a strength coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete. I'll kind of step into wherever you want me to. So,
This is Dr. Mike T. Nelson, creator of the Flex Diet certification, associate professor at the Carrick Institute, and teaching for Rocky Mountain University this quarter.
Nice. All right. Everyone, our show today is going to be about goal setting. So much of what we talk about, whether it's, programming or anything else, dietary changes, it all comes down to somebody's goals. So we thought we would share some stuff about how professionals go about goal setting, right? Whether it's clinical or coaches or whatever. Before that, a little bit of mail and news. Iron Radio general news. We are doing that contest. I guess it's more of a giveaway. Phil had a bunch of cool T-shirts printed up, and if people are making comments on our YouTube taste tests and an iTunes review, I'm recording those addresses, right? I'll send you a T-shirt.
Yeah, and we had one guy, I don't remember his name, that did already enter in and get his T-shirt. So,
oh, good.
I was trying to scroll down here and figure out his name, but
was that Jason?
It might have been.
Okay.
That's why I'm looking it up.
Okay.
So
Jason made a donation, actually, even before the fall fund started.
Donation. Too.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Jason. Cool stuff. Everybody have a little bit of patience. We'll run this through mid-October, I think. By then, because I don't want to keep doing it when supplies run out, right? It's that whole as supplies last kind of disclaimer, but good stuff. We did get an email, and I'll leave his name out, but it was a critical email of the show that essentially said we're adding too much filler. We have that little thing at the beginning of the show. There's a little clip from Phil. We added a thing about the taste tests in the middle, and he was basically saying that he didn't feel like that was good. He wanted all the stuff at the beginning of the show, like all of the public service announcement things at the beginning. I have mixed thoughts about that myself, so I'm just tossing that out on air. If we can get other feedback for that, we could, because I get it. He's like, you do it all at the beginning, and then you get it out of the way. Because he felt like the mid-show break wasn't a break, it was just an annoyance. So I'm just casting that out, cast the net. What do listeners think about that? I will defend us in saying we don't intentionally add filler at all, right? We sit down and we do it the same way we always have. We do a 45 to 75-minute episode, depending on how the conversation goes. So that hasn't changed at all. I don't feel like, well, certainly none of it's intended to extend the length of the episode. If anything, people think an hour is too long, right? So we're working on it. And yes, I mean, I could sit down. My work at the university is crazy because of the whole pandemic and everything. It's hard to sit down and go back and revisit, but I should probably pull one or two of those audio things out. Like, we never really did take our store online that seriously, which is why, in fact, it's better just to point to Phil, right, to make some T-shirts and cool stuff like that. So we're giving that some thought. What else? Let's just go to the news here. I have two little tidbits of news.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This first one is from, let's see, Journal of Strength Conditioning Research. This is spanking new from Pareja Blanco and colleagues. Pareja. Pareja, I think, Blanco. It's called Time Course of Recovery from Resistance Exercise with Different Set Configurations. And I found this interesting, right? Because we were just talking, Phil, about like your standard dose technique, right? How many total reps in a workout. So that's what they did. They broke it all apart into different sets and reps, and they looked at the recovery. Let's take a look here. It says, this study analyzed the response to 10 resistance exercise protocols differing in the number of repetitions performed in each set. 10 males performed 10 different protocols, and I'm not going to bore you with all of them, but different number of reps per set. They looked at mechanical muscle function and plasma markers, so, testosterone, GH, IGF-1, the usual kind of anabolic things. Also, creatine kinase, which a lot of our listeners know is a muscle damage marker. And they looked at this at several time points from 24 hours pre-exercise to 48 hours post. What did they find? Protocols to failure, especially those in which the number of reps performed was high, resulted in larger reductions in mechanical force function. So I suppose you could read that as they were weaker longer afterwards. And that remained reduced up to 48 hours post, which seemed to be the end of their time course. Protocols to failure also showed greater increments in plasma growth hormone, insulin-like growth factor 1, and creatine kinase, so more muscle damage, if you will. In conclusion, resistance exercise to failure resulted in greater fatigue accumulation and slower rates of neuromuscular recovery, as well as higher hormonal responses and greater muscle damage, especially when the max number of reps in each set was high. So I thought that was interesting. Probably not that surprising. If you like high-frequency stuff, I don't know if you want to go to failure then, arguably, right? The flip of that, though, is if you trash yourself, just wait longer, recover, and do a less frequent kind of training program. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're missing there. That point is that, potentially you have, with that greater damage, you have a greater potential to make progress. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what's missing in there. Like, if you could take it all negatively, like, oh, it's doing a lot more damage. Well, yeah, but that damage is potentially creating more progress. Because we have to damage ourselves to create more progress. And that's where, it goes kind of along the lines of what I've seen with my, here's your dose. I found that the people what I like having people do, if possible, is the first set of that initial dose, push that first set as hard as you can. So let's say you're doing squats at 315 for 30. We're going to push set number 1 to right before failure. And then let's say you hit 12. Okay, now we have 18 left. And just do those however 4, 4, 4, 5, whatever. We just break down the rest. So we take one set to near or at failure, and then the rest is just eat your lunch.
Okay.
So, and that's where I've seen the most progress over the last, I don't know, hell, I've been doing this for that aspect of training for 12, 13 years. And the people who seem to have progressed the best do it that way. One really hard set and then just eat your fries. So one at a time. So
yeah, that makes sense to me. I always gravitated toward, I guess, usual bodybuilder mentality, right? Lots of intensity techniques, negatives. I would get wrecked and train a body part about every 5 days, and we've talked about that before, right? Like, Phil, you would even have a Saturday of just whole body destruction, squat, dead, big stuff. And you can make progress like that too. Yeah.
That's most of my training is 1 day now, my real training.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. But there's often also the flip side of the discussion is for pure strength. If you don't want to be a tissue assassin, right? For pure strength, maybe you leave the gym with a little bit left in the tank. You don't have to train to exhaustion. So it's an interesting analysis. I don't know what this really adds, except it's recording, getting some measurements down, something in the literature to help us have this discussion, right, about frequency and failure, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But part of that, do you think, is also the level of the athlete and, like you said, their goals too? I mean, I'm a bigger fan of if your main goal is more strength focused, and yeah, if you add some lean body mass, that's a good thing, but you're not necessarily number one goal. I'll kind of do the inverse of that. Like, I'll try to spread everything out initially as much as I can. And even with more physique-based athletes, I do this initially because I know it's completely different than anything they've ever done also. And then from there, I'll make it kind of more specialized because I find most of them just probably went a little bit too hard with not enough quality and then just waited way too long to come back again. I think there's a tendency to kind of fall into a 7-day cycle when maybe you could come back day 5 or day 4, but you just seem to always I'll just wait till the following Monday.
Monday
that's
is
true.
bench day.
Yep.
Right. Yep.
So
Totally.
yeah.
It's an interesting discussion. I think it's a new paper that's recording this, and just getting some blood markers and performance stuff. I suppose if you were all about the neuromuscular, the high frequency, low damage thing would be almost more like you see a lot of these Olympic lifting protocols, right? Where they're doing 2-a-days and 3-a-days, and they're not doing any eccentric work practically.
Yeah, they're doing mostly concentric work too.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
And that way it's all neuromuscular, and you don't have to worry about the delays and these other things catching up,
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the article now based on this research study for a new way to dramatically increase your growth hormone.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be out soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Actually, well, we all know, but the stuff on GH, usually it's, if you do intense, rapid kind of sets, yeah, you're probably going to get more of this sort of stress hormone, in this case, GH release, But the other one I have is nutritional. This is, again, spanking new. This is from the American Society of Nutrition. This is sort of, I guess you could argue this is one of my two main groups. Eggs and diabetes. One daily egg, a safe bet? With a question mark. This is actually the editorial at the beginning of the journal. And I like these, actually. Even though it's not going to the horse's mouth, they give you a nice synopsis of what's in the journal. But this is from Mashid Degan, Dehghan. They start off saying eggs have long been singled out as a food for restriction in human nutrition. For decades, fear of the high cholesterol content of eggs would lead to elevated cholesterol. Of course, had a lot of big professional groups laying down, limits, like less than 300 milligrams of cholesterol per day, things like that. Or otherwise, if you eat cholesterol, your blood cholesterol will go up and, you're going to get heart disease kind of thing. Mm-hmm. However, randomized trials, animal studies, and mechanistic studies have shown that dietary cholesterol has little impact on blood levels, blood lipid concentrations. Recent meta-analyses and observational studies show that egg consumption is not a risk for coronary heart disease or stroke. Now, in this issue, they talk about 16 existing cohort studies where the authors found that consumption of each egg per day was associated with a 14% higher risk of diabetes. Now, that's interesting, right? Because normally you hear about the heart disease stuff. Mm-hmm. It says, in analysis by cohort, so drilling down into subpopulations here, the associations were statistically significant in the 2 female nurse cohorts, but not the male health professional cohort. Interesting. It says a 19% increase in diabetes risk per daily egg was found in the nurses' health study. A 15% increase in diabetes risk for the nurses' health study too, but only a 7% jump in the health professionals' follow-up study. So the men, presumably. It says, however, associations differed substantially by geographic region, with a significant 18% increased risk per egg consumed in the U.S., but neutrality found in Europe, and an 18% lower risk in Asia. So this obviously starts to get to the whole idea of dietary patterns, and you can't just look at one food item. Mm-hmm. And they do point out, it says egg consumption in the U.S. and parts of Europe typically reflects what we would call a quote-unquote Western diet, which is itself associated with higher diabetes risk. So it's really hard to tease it apart, they say, and I think quite fairly. Interestingly, it says, by contrast, small feeding studies have shown that increasing egg intake to 3 eggs per day significantly decreases certain inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. So that's interesting. In conclusion, moderate egg consumption, such as 1 egg per day, is a safe and affordable source of high-quality protein that should be included in a diet, or can be included if you have moderate intake of, a variety of foods. So I think, in the U.S., you're going to think about all the things that we consume. Eggs, the ingredients include eggs, right? But it's not just an egg fried in, Pam or olive oil or something. So, I don't know. Roughly 1 out of 3 people in the U.S. are pre-diabetic. So this is interesting, right? That eggs could kind of screw with your carb metabolism. But I would think a lot of lifters who do this, if they're on a ketogenic diet or whatnot, they're probably not eating a lot of carbs anyway. Like if you're leaning heavily into the eggs, I don't know.
I need to fly to Asia every day when I eat my egg. And then fly back, and I'll be okay.
Right. Exactly.
That's a new diet. Eggs in Asia only.
Yep.
Right. Because all the accompanying foods are probably healthy instead of,
Yes.
what we eat here. Pastries. I don't know. Mike, have you seen anything with the diabetes in eggs before, or is it just heart disease stuff?
I have not. I'm in my brain. I'm trying to figure out the connection and why that would be. So I have not, to be honest.
Yeah, the sex differences too, right? Like the female studies make it look like it's
also wait,
harder.
Really?
Yeah, harder on women. I don't know. Why would that be?
It's because women naturally have eggs in their body and men don't. So their body accepts the egg.
Oh my God.
Science.
Hashtag science.
Hashtag logic of Phil.
Yep, the men are rejecting the egg.
Oh my God.
So.
Once again.
Yeah. Oh. Well, I guess for the women who listen, maybe you just keep keep your eye open, and if we see news on this, we'll keep reporting on it. But yeah, when you talk about diabetes risk, of course, you're talking about being a poorer carbohydrate handler. But yeah, also, so the worst group would be women in the U.S., right? The least group would probably be like men in the healthier parts of Europe or Asia, I guess. And then people are just going to have to interpret this in different ways. This is these observational studies, right? Damn,
Yeah, that's and I hate to rip on observational studies all the time, but rarely do you ever really figure out what was the reason. And obviously they're not powered to determine causality and stuff too. It's just, hey, here's an interesting thing we saw on a population basis. Now we have to do more work to see, 1, does that even hold true? And 2, what is kind of the mechanism of it?
Yeah. They do point out in the cohort studies that they were talking about, these, whenever you see, of course, increased % risk, that's what they're talking about, right? There was no intervention. They weren't feeding eggs and then taking measurements. Although there are some of those intervention studies I talked about in here, like the C-reactive protein one, I think. But yeah, they point out, the value of these big studies is, of course, their large size, right? Even if it's not causal, you can play with these statistics and get some kind of % contribution. But yeah, the control issues are always going to be there, I guess. Okay, that's about it. I just thought we would throw in one paper on lifting, one on diet, and then let's go to break. When we come back, hopefully we'll have a little bit more of a discussion here about goal setting, because ultimately everything we talk about depends on this, right? Mike, you already said this. Like, well, it depends on your goals,
Yeah.
And I'll tell a little story about how this even came up, but we'll be back in just a minute.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, you know who this is. So I'm here to tell you about Dr. Mike T. Nelson's new book, Why You Should Eat Keto. I don't do it because, I mean, look at me. Come on, I'm fabulous and I'm fantastic. Anyway, you should text the Keto ebook, all in one word, to 44222 to receive your free copy. Do it now.
Okay, listeners, after more than a decade of joining us on the podcast airwaves, you can now also become viewers on YouTube. This is not our usual simple backup of the audio show, but rather a growing body of video taste tests covering various foods of interest to nutrition enthusiasts, bodybuilders, and powerlifters. From within YouTube, simply search for Iron Radio Taste Test or Nutrition Radio Taste Test. In about 15 minutes, we cover taste and texture similar to other products, usefulness to the co-hosts, and whether we would recommend the product to certain clients. You may even want to watch our podcast feed or Facebook group for which products are coming down the pike so you can taste test them with us. Join us for this new monthly project. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, guys, we're back, and I'm going to use this second to give a shout-out to my training partner, Austin. I just want to say, hey, bud, thinking about you. I'll be getting there squatting something heavy today. Austin's stepmother passed last night, so he is not making it in. He spent time with his dad and his family, and I just want to give him a shout-out because I know he listens to the show every week, so there you go.
Wow. That sucks.
Yeah, that's hard. Oof.
Yeah. But
well, it's good to have some support, you know.
Yep.
In fact, that's one of the things we're going to talk about today with the goal setting stuff is support is usually a part of this kind of thing. I said I was just going to tell a quick story to set this up. Essentially, I was talking to an athlete yesterday about to the point of goals, right? Like because of COVID, there's a lot of sports that they're not just about performance on the court or on the field or in the pool right now, but they're almost like, what else can I do? Like we're mostly just lifting now, or maybe it's time to get lighter, like drop some body fat or whatever it might be, or make some gains, you know, because the team performance is a little bit less emphasized, if that makes any sense. So they're trying to take advantage of this kind of stuff. And so then the question came up, like, what is the goal? You know, is it to lose body fat? What type of thing can nutrition or training help with? Because in my mind, the skill part, that's on the coach, right? My role when discussing nutrition is how do I provide some type of fuel and building blocks in a structured way. It's a lot like exercise programming, I suppose, right? But then, like, what's the progression model? And a lot of the same kind of things come up. So goals are just a huge, huge deal. Yeah. But before I even talk about the SMART principle or some of these different acronyms on how to set up goals wisely, I think it's worth mentioning that trans-theoretical model, Prochaska model, some people call it, and that's the readiness to change. In other words, sometimes people they're not ready to even make enough commitment, right, to start thinking about a specific goal. They're just not even ready. And maybe this happens less with you, Phil, because by definition, when people come to your gym, they're motivated to make a change, because they're there. Mike, I'm curious about you because, like, for me, when I worked, like, if I work in a clinical setting, I've had people in front of me like, I don't know, doc just says I have to be here, for obesity or, heart disease, whatever. And you're dealing with somebody who is pre-contemplative, right? They're not even aware. They don't even appreciate that they have a problem. So why am I going to set goals, right? And I think this is something we drop the ball with in exercise science curricula around the country a lot is unlike like the dietetics training I did, and sometimes I'm critical of dietitians, that's for sure, but they do talk about this readiness model before setting goals. And we don't really do it that much in exercise settings, at least not as much as we should, in my opinion, right? We just start going into health screening and programming, just, before the person even gives a damn. Because, of course, exercise training is for all kinds of clinical things. It's not just for performance, but so, Mike, that's a roundabout way of saying, what about you? Like, do you ever work with people that are pre-contemplative, like they don't really even want to make a change, or maybe they are contemplating, that maybe there's something they could improve, or where are you at with your clients?
Yeah, so I would say now I definitely don't on purpose. I'd say going back to when I worked in the gym and started off, I worked with more of those people. One, because I didn't know any better. And then two, starting out, you're kind of at the mercy of, you'll take anyone who will pay the little cheesy rate you put out just because you don't have any experience. So what I do now is, if I'm working with someone as a one-on-one online client, most of the time they're pretty well advanced, right? They've got the habit of exercise or nutrition to some degree, or at least they're at the point where they're willing to pay a fair amount of money and put in the time and effort to do it. And even then, I still make them, I only open it up when I have spots, which, as of lately was just recently, but usually I only did it twice formally this past year. So I have to wait for a specific time. Even then, they have to usually be on the newsletter first, and they have to apply. And then after the application, then I'll do a free call with them. And then we get to decide if it's going to work or not. So I kind of filter a lot of people out on purpose and make them jump through more hoops. And then it's expensive. It's not cheap. And then for people who are, kind of a little bit lower down, maybe not quite ready to change, to me, that's how I view more of the content I put out through the newsletter, maybe some articles, podcasts, things of that nature. It's more content, educational based. My sad reality is of the newsletter, and there's a lot of people who take a lot of action who read the newsletter. I write it expecting that they will take action, and I want them to, but I also know that they're probably not going to because they're at a different stage, and it's also free. There's no skin in the game. So I do most of the stuff to newsletter articles to people who are, maybe not sure. And hopefully over time, and this has happened, people are on for a couple of years, you can actually use education to kind of push them through the model so they do get to the point where they're kind of ready to take more action.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me that they'd be reading the newsletter, like if they might not even be aware at first that they've got a problem, let's say, like lots of belly fat or whatever the problem might be. If you look at like classic textbook stuff, if they're pre-contemplative or they're just starting to contemplate, you tend to do things like, validate their lack of readiness. You don't want to just shame them out of the gate because that's going to send them away, right? But like explore yourself, like almost like what are the risks of non-action? Like if you're dissatisfied in some way, what are the risks of keeping that extra 20 pounds on your gut, or continuing to have very low muscle mass or whatever it might be, but exploring the cost of non-action in a non-judgmental way, I think, while you're validating, hey, you've got the steering wheel, man, you make the call, because none of us want somebody in front of us that's uncommitted and wasting our time.
I would just think of that as just awareness, right? kind of bringing awareness to. So, for example, lately I've done more with aerobic stuff because I've had a lot more clients and questions about people just can't seem to recover. You know, we do a VO2 max test on them, and then the bottom like 15%. You know, but beforehand, they may not even have known that was a problem because they're not an endurance athlete. They're more of a strength and power athlete. So once they get some education and realize, I haven't done cardio for like 10 years. I don't really like walking. My lifting's all super low rep stuff. Oh, yeah, maybe I should do something a little different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then I suppose you got to sort of prepare them to take action, right? And so this is what a professional is doing for a client. And those of you who are listening, of course, this could be for you, but this could also be if you're a trainer or you're a coach and you're working with somebody, right? So to help them prepare, usually there's stuff like social support. And sometimes it's something even like a distance social support, like this podcast, you know, or just accountability, you know, having Phil or Mike in front of you, just monitoring you in some way, right? That creates that, not just accountability, but like social support. So you're kind of, when you're in that preparation phase, you're going to need some social support, maybe some ideas on problem solving, like what we're going to lay out today with appropriate goal setting. Maybe people aren't even aware, to your point, Mike, like education. Like, I don't even know how to go about setting a goal. You know, they have this nebulous, poorly identified goal maybe. So maybe just some ideas on how to do goal setting, you know. In fact, when I was talking to that athlete just yesterday, I used my old arrow model. So when I was doing bodybuilding stuff, and if I had a goal, let's say, to put on 20 pounds, I would draw an arrow up the page. You know, I'd give myself like 20 weeks, let's say, to make a 10-pound gain, or I'm not going to gain 20 pounds of muscle in 20 weeks. But essentially, you create like a realistically long arrow of maybe 16 or 20 weeks. I mean, think about 20 weeks. You're talking about almost half a year, approaching half a year. And then you cut it in half. So maybe at the midpoint, it's 10 weeks. Right? Mm-hmm. And then, so you should be halfway to your weight gain goal. If my goal is 20 pounds, then at the halfway point, I better have gained 10 pounds or I am drifting off the rails, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can cut those halves in half, and then you have quarter goals, and you get the idea. You just keep chopping this arrow in half progressively, and then you get an idea, like it might be every several weeks you should have gained 2 pounds, after 2 or 3 weeks. If that hasn't happened, bro, you better eat more or lift differently. You better adjust something, right? Because you are not going to reach that goal. So I like that it makes the smaller term goals and that kind of stuff. Again, as people are in that action phase, or even like a maintenance phase where they need reinforcement, right? You need feedback, that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's the weight gain one I have my own thoughts on, but I mean, that's where it doesn't tend to. I've seen it 100 times. I'm going to gain 20 pounds in 20 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then after 10 weeks, they've gained 4 pounds.
Yeah.
And they're screwed. And I really like approaching at least the weight gain part with attack it. Get it. What happened? So gain 20 pounds in 10 if your goal is 20 pounds in 20. And then just maintain that. Mm-hmm. Attack that freaking goal and get it when it's weight gain. Because then potentially if you stay there, things are going to get better over the next 10 weeks. Your body's going to still change. Yep. You're still in this calorie surplus because you've gained 10 pounds. So you're having to eat to hold on to that 10 pounds. Mm-hmm. But that's a different subject. But,
No, I hear what you're saying. I mean, let's face it. This is not linear. Mike's the engineer. He always hates too much talk on linear, right? And so I get it. And so you are kind of crashing through. In fact, if we get into like the goal setting itself, we got somebody they're taking action, and they're already with us and they're taking action. The whole idea of that SMART principle, right, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and then time-based, right, or time-limited. Those are all really good things. And I think in the sciences, we naturally want to observe and record, So a lot of this stuff, when I was in dietetics training early on, there seemed to be this, like it was an epiphany for some of the people around me that they were going to monitor and record. And I'm like, that's all we do in science is monitor and record. You know, I mean, it would only make sense that you want to periodically get someone on the scale if their goal is weight gain or maybe it's fat loss, you know. Yeah. But to your point about like crashing through in a non-linear way, that whole idea in the SMART principle of realistic, I always liked setting the goals that you could crush. Like you want to build confidence. You know, if your goal is 40 pounds in 20 weeks, I don't know, dude, good luck, you know. Yeah. Instead, you create stuff that you're probably going to crush. And if you crush it earlier on, that's going to be a reward and a motivator, I would think, right? Because you're like, I am crushing it, man.
Yeah.
You know.
And then you can move on. That's having sub goals and things like that. And I can tell you, like, right after you sent me this topic, the two biggest things that I hit on, because like you said, generally I have very goal-driven people come into me anyways. The biggest things I see is, you know, everybody wants to be Ed Cohn or Dorian Yates. Everybody has that idea in their head. Yeah. The first problem I see is they don't have a realistic view of where they are, where they're starting at. So, and that's like me. Like if I'm driving to visit Lonnie in Columbus and I need to make a map to get there, well, I better know if I'm in Topeka or New York. If not, I'm going to head the wrong way. Yeah. So it's really the step one is right after figuring out I want to do this. It's okay. Where am I realistically?
Baseline.
You know, do I need more cardio? What do you need to be Ed Cohn? You know, what does he have? I don't have. You know, and then once you realize where you actually are, now you can set a goal. And most people have no clue where they are. Yeah. A lot of them are they think they're way ahead of where they are, which screws them up because then they're training in a much more advanced way than they're ready for. So, or vice versa. And then the next one that's huge is, especially if you have lofty goals, like be an Ed Cohn or be a Dorian Yates, that looks neat. It looks really fancy. Everybody wants to be him until they get in his shoes. And you realize all the negative aspects that he had to go through, the costs. Yep. And you got to sit down and write these down and realize them and then do one of two things. Accept them and go for the goal, or don't accept them and realize that it's not for me. Because any lofty goal is going to have massive, massive negatives to it. And you better sit down and accept those because you're going to run into them. Like if you want to be the world's strongest man, let's all be honest here. You better be prepared to do a lot of drugs. It's just, honestly, and some people don't think that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? It's things like that. Or if you want to be Mr. Olympia.
Yeah, especially bodybuilding. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're just going to have to if you want to make that level. Now, if you don't want to, that's okay. Let's change your goal.
Right.
Let's be the best, you know, find somebody who's done it, and I'm going to be as good as him. You know, as good as that guy that did it under the circumstances I'm willing to do it under.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't do that.
I wish I had a quarter for every time somebody said, I want to be a pro bodybuilder. All right. It's like, exactly. Okay. Oh, yeah. How about you win a non-national qualifier? How about we make that your like a sub-state level show, right? Yeah, that's the R, I suppose, the realistic part. But you touched on something that I think exercise phys people do very well, coaching and exercise science, and is baseline assessments, right? How, like you said, if you go to the doctor, she doesn't just put you on all these meds. She takes some information down, you know, signs, symptoms, like she does a physical or an assessment of some kind, maybe blood work. But because if you don't know where you are, how can you quantitatively progress, right? So the M in SMART is measure it, bro. And if you don't do initial assessments, and that's the problem, I think, with social media. You know, you get on YouTube and it's like, get on my program, get on my template. It's like, wait, you have no idea who you're even talking to, right?
Yeah.
Where are they?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I suppose different assessments can be clever, and everybody's going to have their own thing that they like to measure, probably.
Yeah, or even people that come up and they're like 5'8", 130 pounds, and they want to be Brian Shaw. It's like, dude, you're going to need to be 6'7" and 250 untrained. You know, It's not in the cards. You know?
No, that's right.
With hands like catcher's mitts and wrists the size of my biceps.
It's not you. And I don't know how many people I have that do that. It's like they come in and I want to be this. You're not built for it. And I can't change that no matter what I do. You know, so.
But you'd be giving them the social support to maybe choose something they can crush.
Yes,
you know?
Exactly. Let's find something you can be good at and naturally and go for that. And I have people I train for things they are naturally not built for because they love that thing. And I'm okay with that, but I make them realize that you realize you're not built for this. We can do it, but you're fighting your own genetics. And that's okay, just as long as you know that.
Yep.
So,
yeah, if I wanted to be a center in the NBA, that's not in the cards for me. I'm 5'9", right? Or even, to your point, right, like powerlifting. Pretty early on, I'm like, listen, I have really little joints. I'm not a huge dude. Yes, could I have progressed in strength? Sure. But that's not what I was really best at. You know, like I don't, you know, at my best, I think I could bench a little over 300 pounds. You know, the listeners are probably laughing, but, you know, like 3 1/4 sloppy bench in the off season. That's not really setting a picture that I'm going to be really good at this. Right?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and the thing is, too, even if somebody's goal is different, like I have one lifter that comes to my mind whenever we talk about this. She came to me and wanted to be a CrossFitter. She was built to be an Olympic weightlifter. Like, she puts on weight real easy. She's small up top, huge legs, huge butt. And, you know, so running was a chore. And, you know, I was like, okay, that's fine. But I kept throwing in weightlifting and kept teasing towards that. And what you find out is, if you get somebody doing what they're naturally gifted at, they start to really like that because they're naturally good at it.
Reward.
Even if that wasn't their goal, they're like, oh, man, this is easy for me, you know, in relative terms. So, and that's where I'll feed them that stuff. It's like, okay, we'll train you for this, but how about we try a little bit of this? And usually after time, they realize, even though they fought it initially mentally, that, hey, man, I'm really good at that. And what I'm good at, I like doing. People like doing things they're good at, you know, in general.
And that can be a pro or a con, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have Adam Glass. He said that to a lot of people he was training. He's like, isn't it just more fun to do things you're better at?
Yeah, exactly.
And it was funny, and I'd be in the gym with him when he's saying this to clients, and the look on the client's face is just utter shock of like, oh, like no one said that to me before. I never thought of this, you know?
Yeah.
Right. There was a joke, I don't know where I saw it, YouTube or a movie or something, and the guy says, you know that thing you're just really not good at? Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, because otherwise you're gonna feel this sense of failure, like you're working your ass off, and you're just you're not programmed genetically or otherwise to really get very far in that direction, you know.
Yeah. And like Phil said, I think that's fine as long as you understand the cost, have a realistic output or expectation of where you're at, and if you still enjoy it, then hey, that's great.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I love kiteboarding, but I don't currently see in 3D, so trying to jump over 20 feet where you don't know where you're at in the air is probably not the best thing.
Right.
But it's super fun when you don't kill yourself.
Yeah. So there you go. You know?
Yeah. Now, Mike, as far as like, I guess the S in SMART, like specific or the M in measurable, what are some of the things that you like to get down for people? Obviously, it's going to depend on their goal, but again, we're helping them set this goal.
Yeah.
What do you like to measure? Because I know your engineering mind, you're always thinking about, you know, I don't want to say gadgets. Sometimes it's just, you know, multiple variables to lay down some kind of baseline. How do you do that?
Yeah, so for me, it just starts with what I'm going to look at in an assessment. So what Phil was saying, what you guys were saying too, is probably 2 years ago, I radically changed the assessment I did. I gave myself the luxury of having an entire week to do an assessment. So everything from, you know, maybe a max lift or a rep lift to breathing stuff to some aerobic bioenergetic stuff. And again, it depends on what the client's goals are. If they're like going to be a CrossFit athlete, then it's probably going to be 7 days of testing, which is going to be pretty horrible because we have to do all the bioenergetic stuff too, in addition to lifting. If you're just mostly a physique athlete, a couple lists, a few breathing things, a couple of their movement assessments, and maybe a VO2 max, and you're good to go. So I think the assessment will start off with the things that I want to measure that I think will drive them closer to their goal. And then based on the assessment, we'll kind of determine, ideally based on physiology, what would be best for them. So I'll literally write out a plan that's 100% only based on physiology. So, for example, if I have a physique athlete who has a very low VO2 max and has a hard time recovering, maybe has had some interesting diet practices in the past, which is super, super common, unfortunately. I probably know that I need to work on more of an aerobic base initially so that they can actually do more lifting and recover. The downside is they're not really paying me for that, so how much they can tolerate on that from a psychology side, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, and that's where you have to have a discussion and kind of a compromise. So a lot of times I'll just split it in half and be like, okay, you're going to lift 3-4 days a week, we're going to make it complete rest, we're going to have it be a little bit more performance based to start, and then you're going to do some aerobic stuff on the other days. So a lot of it, I think, comes down also to understanding and explaining why you're doing it. And I also found by having an assessment, I can go back and look at that and be like, hey, here's where you are at for normative data. So even if this isn't related to your goals, if you're in the bottom 20% for aerobic fitness, and especially you're getting older, just from a pure health standpoint, that's something you probably should consider, right? Just like if you had a high blood pressure, high glucose, whatever it is, different factors to look at that. And then you can test them as you go along. It depends on the time frame, but I may test anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks and show that, hey, you are making progress, so that's good. And then you're looking for how does it transfer to their main goal? Oh, yeah, I can actually do, 4 or 5 sets of an exercise, and 2 days later, I feel pretty good. Or when we started, it was 4 days later, I still felt like crap. All right, so once they see that transfer to their goal, now they're a little bit more bought in. And the last part on that, too, is if you get really fancy, you can actually do sub-max testing. So almost every session they do, to me, is some form of testing, even though it's sub-max. Right? So each time they do their check-in, I'll go through, look at all their lifts, look at everything that they have, and just kind of look to see, are they making progress? Are they going in the right direction? And then things like heart rate variability, sleep data will kind of tell me the cost that they're paying to do that. So if their performance was still on par, but their HRV shows that their stress level is absolutely crazy, hey, that's cool. Their performance is good. I'm going to probably start a taper or deload much earlier and cut them off there versus, well, performance was still good. HRV shows that they're not really that stressed. Great. We're going to have them do more volume. We're going to be able to add more to their system at that point.
Right. Some kind of overload. Yeah.
Right. It's just so individual to each person, too. Yeah. I think that's the hardest part about being online.
Right.
If you don't have any metrics or anything you're looking at, you can't watch the person. You can't watch them move. You can't see their mannerisms. You can't listen to the tone of voice, their posture. All the other cues, I think that good coaches subconsciously just do all the time. You don't have any of that online. At best, you'll get a video once in a while, which they think is they're not going to send you their crappy list right away either. So it's usually like the best looking ones.
Yeah. That's why templates drive me nuts, man. There's no individual. There is an art, to the psychological. Everything is biopsychosocial to me. Yep. And like you're talking about starting with the physiology, and you're also talking about a number of weeks there. So let's just finish this up with the R and the T in SMART, like realistic and time limited. Contests do that quite well, Phil. So I thought I might ask you, like, is that a way that you build in a goal? Because put your name on the dotted line, and the contest is X weeks.
For sure,
out.
It is. I mean, like I've talked about this a lot of times. I mean, I've seen it every time. Like with every athlete I have, the minute we sign a sheet and you have to do this at this time in front of all these people, shit gets real. And people take it a lot more serious. And all of a sudden, training has a bigger meaning. Now it comes down to the individual again. Some people take that really well. I have a few people that fold. Some people don't take that well, and they stress over it, and they do worse. Like I have one lifter in specific in my head that, like he'll kill it, and then the minute we sign up for a meet,
yeah,
it goes downhill. And then it goes back to in that same line. It's knowing the individual, and after all the testing's done and the finding baselines, like you talked about it earlier, a lot of people are driven by small realistic goals they can crush. And then there's other people like myself, and I've always been this way, and I don't know why, I really like setting up very lofty goals. Like there's a good chance I won't make it there goal. I like that because what I've noticed is even though I will fight for that, and I don't mind if I don't get it, I think I can. You know, I get myself in a mindset where I'm going for this and I'm going to get it. And I really think I can get it. And even if I don't, what I found out is I get a lot further than I would have if I didn't. You know, like if I set the goal tomorrow to squat 1,000 pounds, I'd probably squat 9 and I'd be really freaking happy. You know, even though I didn't make it to 1,000, I squatted 900 pounds. You know, and I'm also built in a way that I recognize and I celebrate the small victories along the way.
Right.
So it's getting somebody to set a lofty goal and then celebrate the 10 pound and the 5 pound and the 20 pound jumps.
Yeah.
And realize that, holy crap. And I do this in business and everything. Like I have big lofty goals for my businesses. And what's happened? I mean, I went from a low 5-figure business to a mid 6-figure business. You know, and I'm not where I want to be, but holy shit, I've made it a long ways.
Right.
You know, or actually 7-figure business. Sorry. But, whatever. It's, so it's figuring out that type of person. Do I need to set low goals so that they can just, and not even talk about where I want them, where I think they can get until, you know, okay, let's chip that goal away, celebrate it big, make another one, celebrate it big, you know, or can I go ahead with this person and we're going Brian Shaw with you. I think you could be Eddie Cohn. You know, it's something you think they possibly could do and just go right for the big goal, get that in their head. And then look what you did. You added 20 pounds. You added 40 pounds. We're on our way. Let's keep going. You know, some people can't handle that because they keep their eye on that end too much and they're stressing about that. Whereas I can know where my end is, but I have the ability to celebrate the small ones along the way.
Short-term goals. We did an episode on sub goals, I think. Actually, my brother and I were like that before. We really kind of blew past a lot of people in my little hometown gym because we kept holding ourselves to a national standard, right?
Yes, exactly.
And now there's no way, because of the decisions I was willing or not willing to make, that I was going to be like win the nationals. You know what I mean? Just with drugs, frankly, and all that kind of stuff. But my goal would be, like, I always wanted to be like completely in shape at like 210 and then dehydrate down and barely make the top of the light heavyweight class, you know, and compete like at a level just below the nationals maybe, you know. I never quite got there, but I was able to compete around the low 190s, you know, and at my height that's way further than I would have gotten if I was happy with being the big fish in the small pond, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, if you're 10 years old and you aim for the NFL, you'll probably make college ball. You know?
Right. Yeah, there you go.
And frickin' be happy. Look what I did, you know?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have the opportunity, go to, if it's a national or world competition or whatever, like even if you're only there as a spectator, like go to it earlier than later to kind of know what that looks like and know, you know, some of the lifts. This is easier than ever now with the internet and stuff. But like, you know, Jody and I did a competition for grip in Finland last year.
Yeah.
And, you know, in all honesty, I didn't get invited there on my grip strength prowess. I knew the guy running the meet and said, hey, we'll go to Finland. And he's like, yeah, come on in and just, you should compete too. I'm like, okay, sure.
Right?
You know, the people in the 175 weight class were beating me, but that's okay. You know, because you have that experience, you know what it looks like, you know what loads people in your class were competing, and I think that goes a long way to give you that realistic component also, and to get at least a little bit of experience of what it's like to be there too.
Right. Yeah. Definitely the R in SMART. If you don't go watch, how can you know what's a career goal? Even if it's a career goal, you know, which is even, like Phil said, even beyond the short and long term, super long term career aspiration, you know, it can be a motivator, you know.
Yes. And there's also something to be said about go in, compete against what you want to be and get your ass kicked. You will learn a ton. You know, like any fighter out there that's great. I don't know. I can't think of one, but they got their ass kicked a lot more times than they kicked ass. And that's how they learned. You know, I've stepped on platforms, and early on, I got ruined by my competition. But you know what happened? I knew what I wanted to be then, and I watched and I learned from the people actually doing it.
Yeah,
So.
And most of the time, those people are like super helpful.
Yeah.
That's a good point. You think that they're like high performance a-holes, and a lot sometimes, but and this might be worse than bodybuilding, right? But there's been more than once I was on stage. I'm looking left and right, and these guys are, they're using GH. Their skin is like pink cellophane. They're like 1% fat. They're huge. They're a head shorter than me at the same weight. But I kind of came to that again, that awareness, like, dude, you look fantastic. You're making some decisions I couldn't make, but you get this idea. And in fact, one of them in particular, just such a class act. He's got his kids up on stage when he wins the overall, in the event and everything. And I mean, happy to tell people, real specific with everything, how he trained, what he used on multiple levels, but just like transparent family guy, and it's refreshing that's there. You can't just automatically, I think that the lay public makes certain assumptions about these guys, and often they're wrong. They're wrong.
Yeah. The last quick comment I had too with Phil's lofty goals is I then transfer that into what is making that part of your identity, because I think that's going to have the most leverage from a long term. So I have a little thing that I try to write out most days that has like my top, right now I have 7 goals on there. And then I write them out in a way that's in the future tense. So for example, the first one I have is, I'm someone who rows 500 meters in 1 minute, 32 seconds at 450 average watts. So it's writing it that I am someone who, this is part of my identity. It's not saying that I've already done this. It's saying that I have the capacity in order to do this. And then it has the specifics of what's actually measurable to know what the end actually is. And that allows you then to have measurable sub-goals in order to get to that.
Yeah, own it kind of thing. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it. All of us, if somebody said, "Who are you?" most people immediately talk about their job. And I know part of what Phil does with the lifting is also his job, one of 2 major things, I suppose. But you get my point. Is we would probably all self-identify as, I'm a lifer weightlifter guy. It's just a fact. And after this many years, that's not even up for debate. Nobody's going to convince me otherwise. Anyway. All right. Well, I think that's some good stuff about, again, preparing to make a goal and then how you actually wisely make a goal. I really think, honestly, working with someone like you guys, that's what gives you that realistic rate of change. The worst thing I see people do is they try to accomplish some absurd goal in 12 weeks. And we just need to have the patience, and you got to work with somebody who knows, or like Mike said, go watch and start to understand how long some of these take, because you might find yourself choosing a different goal.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest piece of advice I have too, is that it's going to take longer than what you think, and you want to at least have someone guide you through what are the potential costs up front. Because I think the downside of the SMART goals is you can torch yourself and not realize it to try to make something that maybe wasn't your big goal. And I don't think people spend enough time thinking about, like Phil was saying, and you were saying too, Lonnie, what is the cost I am willing to pay for this? And that's an individual decision. Everyone has to make their own decision of what they want to do. But knowing that up front is super, super helpful.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong answer.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you see the rich guy or the pro bodybuilder, you don't know what went into that.
Exactly.
All you see is this superhero, Right on.
Guys.
All right, good stuff. Yep, we'll see you.
See you later.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.